Hello again, everyone. Hope you're well wherever you are, out walking on your daily run. If you're on the way to work, just a little bit of me time, you time, wherever you are, however you are. Hope you're surviving the sticky heat and you're enjoying all that's going on in the mad boxing world. And as ever, we got plenty to reflect on. Lewis Crocker and Liam Paro in a bit of a humdinger and a squeaker down in Brisbane. Ben Whittaker sparkling again, probably rubbing a few people up the wrong way as well again. But I suspect the Americans absolutely loved him over stateside, and Boots underlining that he is indeed a special talent and one who can do it at 154 pounds as much as he can at welterweight. We'll look at the action this weekend. We'll dip into the history books from 1998 and we get a glimpse of the lightweight version of Sugar Shane Mosley. All of that coming up on this week's pod. Matt Christie joins me as ever. How are you?
On top of the world, mate. I'm good. Yeah, I'm good. There's a break, it appears, in the weather today. It's very breezy outside. We've got a bit of rain, and it's lovely, to be honest. Not one of those that's going to moan about the heat, but it was a little bit peculiar for a while. I wouldn't mind if I could get to sleep, but it's just that not being able to sleep after a long, sticky day that was starting to get a little bit tiresome last week.
Yeah, there was 3 or 4 nights on the bounce, wasn't it, where it was just uncomfortable. It was unconscionable. Yeah, and that edge of sleep where you sort of feel like you're nearly there but not quite there, and then almost drunk with tiredness when you wake up.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I don't mind it. Don't mind it in my mid-20s. I can deal with that, but not these days. That's for sure. Do you still plow on with your sort of March, April to September, October shorts all the way?
Oh, yes. Yeah, definitely. Far more comfortable in a pair of shorts than anything else. So
he may be comfortable, folks. It doesn't mean that it's comfortable viewing.
No, you do kind of sometimes. I do remember kind of seeing people out and about in shorts in December when it's cold, and you just think, what a tit. But yeah. When I'm out and about walking, I much prefer to have shorts on.
Okay. We had friends up for the weekend. He generally, one of my mates, he brings me a boxing book when he comes up, as well as lots of lovely goodies, wines and so on and so forth. So I've no idea about this book, but it looks really interesting. He said the reviews were good. It's Don't Start Counting, I'm Not Getting Up, The Life of Gary Davidson, a true story of uncompromising bravery by Gary Davidson Jr. So I'm looking forward to that. Looks slightly off the shelf, a bit different. So that's my boxing book. And actually, we're going to be talking about Mosley against Wilfredo Ruiz from 1998. It's actually in Philly at the Apollo Theatre in Philly. It's actually a Russell Peltz promotion. And I bought that $50 and a cut eye, the sort of Russell Peltz memoirs, and I actually haven't. I started it and then didn't quite power into it. So I need to read that because I'm really looking forward to that. That'll be some great stories of the sort of Philly scene and promoting very much at the cutting edge, sort of back in that era where you could take it back to whenever you want, but certainly through sort of Mosley's early career, that sort of 70s, 80s, 90s era. That's going to be really interesting.
Do you know what I've done, Alex? I've looked at the wrong fight. I've looked at the wrong fight. Do you know what fight I did? And as you just said Ruiz, I thought, I better correct him on that. I did the fight I did Wilfredo Rivera.
This is a perfect case in point, folks, of read your messages. Anyway, all right. So what we could do later on is you'll talk about Wilfredo Rivera and I'll talk about Wilfredo Ruiz.
Let's do them both. Let's do them both.
Two for the price of one. Let's talk about briefly just a couple of news lines. Oleksandr Usyk has vacated his belt. He's going to have one more fight than retire, Oleksandr Usyk. So it's a kind of thumb in the eye to those that were wrapping their arms around Rico Kickboxer. Yes, defend your titles. He's one in the eye for them, isn't it? So it's just a reminder to the sanctioning bodies. You get what you deserve, folks. And Usyk rowing his own boat, Matthew, rowing his own boat.
He is rowing his own boat, and, he's never really liked a sense of being disrespected. And you kind of one now looks back to him just having that grueling fight with Rico Verhoeven, and then him being presented with Ajit Kabayel in the ring afterwards. And Sergei Lapin, kind of Usyk's promotional advisor, said last week prior to Usyk's announcement that they're not going to be bullied into having a fight. They're not going to cave to pressure on social media to decide what they're going to do after everything that Usyk has achieved, everything he's done inside the ring, essentially going to almost every opponent's backyard during his time as cruiserweight and heavyweight world champion, and crafting the career that he had. He's not essentially now going to say, well, I'm going to fight Kabayel because certain people want me to. There was a suggestion that it didn't make commercial sense. So maybe there's a suggestion there that Turki Al-Sheikh may not, after all, be behind Kabayel Usyk in Germany, which is something that he said before. And he came out and he said, don't be surprised if you've seen Usyk fight for the last time already. And that was about 2 days before Usyk then came out and said, I'm relinquishing 3 of my heavyweight titles, and I'm going to have a last dance on my own terms. And, he explained it a little bit further the following day and saying that, look, I want to have one more fight, but I'm completely aware that there are people like Moses Atoma, there are people like Ajit Kabayel, there are people out there that are worthy champions. So let the belt situation move forward without me, and I'll kind of run my own race. So it would have been, I think, easy for him to hang on to at least one of the titles and persuade one of the sanctioning bodies to sanction whatever he wants to do in his last fight. Now, there is a suggestion and there's reports that it's either going to be Deontay Wilder in his last fight, or it's going to be another cross collaboration and it'll be John Jones in his last fight. I think Wilder would make the most sense. I think if in many, many years to come and people look back on Oleksandr Usyk's record and Deontay Wilder is in it, then I think he can essentially say he's beaten the best fighters of his era. Wilder really is the marquee name that's missing from his record as it stands at the moment. The reason he couldn't go on and defend his WBC title, for example, against Deontay Wilder, who's ranked 7th by the WBC, is that he had been ordered to face Ajit Kabayel, the interim belt holder, and they had until June the 30th, which actually is today as we record, to show that those negotiations had been resolved and that they've got a fight date in the diary. If they hadn't, then it would have gone out to purse bids. But Usyk essentially said, don't need to do that. I am relinquishing all my titles. Now, what does that mean for the heavyweight division? We're not back to ground zero. I think that is kind of good news, I would say. We're not back to ground zero where we're not having to, all of the titles have been thrown up in the air and all of the vacant titles have got to be contested. The WBC have since announced that Kabayel has been upgraded. So he will go up to full champion. We already have Daniel Dubois with the WBO. I'm seeing reports, although I haven't had it actually verified by the WBA, or if they have verified that, I've missed it. But the WBA, there's reports that Murat Gassiev will move up to full fat champion, which leaves the IBF title. Now, Frank Sanchez currently number 1 with the IBF. Yesterday, his manager yesterday told Sky Sports that they will be keeping a very close eye on the Filip Hrgović-Moses Itauma fight on August 29th. The number 2 spot in the IBF is vacant. Number 3 is Itauma. Number 4 is Hrgović. So the hope is that the winner of Hrgović-Itauma will automatically then fight Frank Sanchez for the vacant IBF heavyweight title later in the year. Itauma's sitting pretty as the number 1 with the WBA and the WBO. and number one with the WBC is Tyson Fury, who today announced that, yes, he is going to, or he alluded to, yes, he's going to have a fight. It's going to be something a bit different. I can't say what the rumours are, or I can't say what I'm hearing from certain people behind the scenes, but that's probably going to raise eyebrows in a bad way. The location, not necessarily. That's going to be a bit out there and might be interesting, but the opponent that I'm hearing will send the social media brigade into a spin, ladies and gentlemen. But it's not verified, so I'm going to do some homework after we have recorded this podcast. And if that has been confirmed, you'll all know what I'm talking about.
Is it a boxer?
It's a boxer. It's a boxer that I'm hearing. An old heavyweight boxer, veteran heavyweight boxer. And when I first heard the name, I thought, goodness me, didn't he fight me in 2013? And he hadn't. So, yeah, read into that what you will, because that isn't being confirmed yet. And I think when it's with Tyson Fury and things are flying around behind the scenes, I'm a little bit reluctant to mention any names because things keep changing in the wibbly wobbly world of Tyson Fury.
Indeed. How, going back to Usyk, how fair is it? How right is it for Usyk's approach to all of this? Because obviously he's now sort of releasing the sport from its shackles or his control to then play out as it can according to the spurious rankings of different organizations. So, I mean, the idea that, we won't be told what to do. Well, that's kind of how the system works. How much of it is to do with just the stage of Usyk's career, where he's at, what it is that he wants? How much of it is, because Ajit Kabayel's been on the door. He's been knocking on the door. He's been a deserving candidate challenger for a long time now. And Usyk's been granted, I think, fair dispensation for a good period of time to not face up to his responsibilities with one of those organizations. So how do you sort of balance the climate, the culture, the nonsense of the sanctioning bodies, Usyk's own position? How do you juggle all of that for us?
I think you have to do it with your kind of tongue in your cheek and a smile on your face, almost. Just like, this is where we're at in the sport. I think there was a concern, and I think I'm fairly sure we voiced that in the build-up to the Verhoeven fight, in that, on the one hand, you're hearing people say, well, after everything he has achieved, he should be allowed to do whatever he likes at this point of his career. Yet we pointed out that, okay, but this is so alien to the rest of Usyk's career. He has looked around for the hardest available opponent for all of his career. And is this now the fact that he's happy to take on a 1-0 novice fighter who made his reputation in kickboxing, as opposed to fighting Kabayel? Was that an admission, whether consciously or not, that he's no longer willing to fight the best available opponents? I think now, with hindsight, we can say, okay, well, maybe you should have done this before you fought Verhoeven. Maybe that would have been the ideal time to do it. All we can do now is speculate as to what's going on in the head of Oleksandr Usyk. But he's 39 years old. He probably felt an awful lot of relief to get the victory over Verhoeven. He would have been aware that was a far more difficult fight than he wanted or had prepared for. And now, whether there's an admission that, no, I really don't want to go in there with someone like a Kabayel or a Moses Satoma now, so I'm going to leave them all to it. And all he needed was his performance in the Verhoeven fight to kind of confirm that to him. I don't know, but I think ultimately he's now doing the right thing. We do live in a world with 4 sanctioning bodies, as much as Zuffa Boxing may say that we don't have to, as much as the 4 sanctioning bodies have driven me round the bend for the best part of the last 20 years in terms of kind of stalling and splintering the sport. But that is the world that we live in. And Usyk has said, okay, you lot go your way, I'm going to do mine. You can't possibly criticise me for what I do next now, because I've essentially said I am no longer operating at the highest level. It is what it is, but I think it's probably quite unusual for someone of Usyk's standing to make that stand and to be that honest and to say, yes, I want to carry on, but I don't want to fight the best. and he's being as honest as he can be about it. And by giving back the sanctioning body titles, he probably feels like he can go on and do what he wants to do. John Jones, please, let's not do that. We don't want to see that. Deontay Wilder, I can just about get on board with from a legacy standing. I can understand why he would, that might be the fight to appeal to him if he does essentially want to complete the set.
So it's sort of the best thing for Usyk, and it's the best thing for the sport going forward, I suppose. So ultimately, it's probably win-win-win, isn't it? So that's the landscape opening up for a whole raft of people, as Matt was underlying about what it means and for who. So the paths are leading forward. Are they going to converge, and at what time and how in this aging heavyweight division? Final line on the news, and that is that Eddie Hearn, on the back of what we were saying last week about sort of Turki Al-Sheikh's health and his desire to maybe get some daylight and clear discussion between Dana White and Eddie Hearn, they are all going to meet in the next week. What can you tell us about that?
Supposedly, I mean, Eddie Hearn kind of had the platform last week in the build-up to Boots Ennis Zayas to kind of respond to all of these various things that have been flying around with Dana White's involvement in Joshua Fury. And Eddie Hearn last week said something along the lines of, what you guys don't know is that Turki Al-Sheikh has twice, and I think that the term he used is smacked Dana White's bottom for releasing information that either wasn't true or he shouldn't have released. And he referenced that press conference in Bournemouth where Dana White, for the first time, came out and said, I know where Tyson Fury versus Anthony Joshua is happening. I know what the contracts say. I'm going to be in control of it. He said that in the post-fight press conference. That went out on all the Zuffa channels. Turki Al-Sheikh then ordered that to be removed from the Zuffa channels because Dana White shouldn't have been saying that. So you got Eddie Hearn saying that. But then on Sunday, Dana White almost repeated that claim, saying, I know where it's going to be. Let's just wait and see what happens. I know exactly where this fight is going to take place. But yes, Eddie Hearn said that this week he will be going off to meet with Turki Al-Sheikh and Dana White, and I suspect there will be a representative from Queensberry there, whether that be George Warren or Frank Warren, in that they, in an effort to kind of resolve all this he said, she said, and who is doing what, and what's going to happen with the Joshua Fury fight. So we'll wait and see what happens with that. But Eddie Hearn himself has said, look, I've really got no interest in going along and being told that this has to happen and I've got to act in this way. I'm operating in the real world of boxing. I've just staged this fight with Ennis and Zayas, which is one of the best fights of the year. I know boxing. Dana White doesn't know boxing. Dana White was caught out a bit because he didn't appear to know all of the fights on his card at the weekend. Eddie Hearn has said, well, that's ridiculous if you don't know all the fights that are on your card and you're not familiar with all the fighters that are on your card. This guy's a chancer. This guy doesn't know what he's doing. We're yet to see any evidence that he's going to come in and change the sport of boxing. So, yeah, I mean, to be honest, I'd quite like to be a fly on the wall at that summit, should it happen. But how much it's going to resolve when you have got egos of stratospheric proportions around that table is doubtful.
Dana White said it would be Turkey's biggest assignment, biggest job yet, didn't he? And he's absolutely right. Yeah, I do wish they'd just stop all that sort of undercutting at every single opportunity. Just keep your mouth shut. Just resist the temptation. Give it a go.
The egos won't allow it, will they? The egos will not allow that to. They will not allow themselves to stay quiet when they feel like they've been wronged on a public platform.
Right, let's talk about the action, because it was very public, of course, at the weekend, with Boots moving up to 154 and Ben Whittaker getting a little taste of American action. There's so many fighters from the UK, would-be star fighters, have done before. You know, Hatton very early on in his career, sort of half a dozen, 8 fights in, getting to go across to the States. Nassim Hamed, of course. launching his career stateside with that Kevin Kelly barn burner. So they've been there before, and Ben Whittaker did it at the weekend. But it was Boots Ennis who really was the nominal headliner, moving up in weight. We said Zayas would pose a few problems. He did, but he was kind of put in his place very early on, wasn't he, Matt? I mean, down in the first, down in the fifth, made to go down again in the seventh. Probably more than you could have hoped for, but not so much more from Boots up at 154 pounds that you were in any way surprised. Further evidence that there is a bit of special talent there.
He appeared, from a fan's point of view, he appears to have it all. There's the willingness to brawl, there's the slick skills, there's the punching power, exceptionally likeable behind the microphone. And that's the kind of opponent that we wanted to see him produce that kind of performance against. There's going to be the old faults kind of pointed out, that he does enjoy a brawl a bit too much. He does take too many punches, and that should be a concern. I think the way his head was rocking back in the third round, as his promoter Hearn said afterwards, that it was kind of heart in the mouth moments when you're seeing him starting to rock and roll like that. Boots himself said afterwards, I was having fun in there. There was no problem whatsoever. I was in control from the first bell until the last. But that wild third round might tell a tale on Boots Ennis's future, should he continue to fight with that much abandon. But when he does put it all together, and when he is the fighter in the ascendancy and he's the one landing the shots, he looks as special as anyone out there at the moment.
Was that round... Was that to do with the occasion? Was that to do with moving up in weight? Was that to do with wanting to get back in the ring? Was that to do with all of those things and wanting maybe to really make an impact, make a statement, sell yourself? How much of that was at play, do you think? Or how much of it is just an inherent character trait, character flaw that opponents and us as fans and neutrals are going to have to really clock on to going forward?
I think it's an accumulation. I think Boots himself said he got lazy. He knew what he should be doing. He knew he should be moving his head more than that, but he was enjoying himself in there. He felt he was having enough success, so he kind of just carried on with what he was doing. I think it's also kind of a little bit similar to how we were speaking about how Ryan Garner approached his fight in Southampton. Now, we know that Boots wasn't in front of his hometown fans, but by all accounts, Lance Pugmire was in there, Tris Dixon was in there. So the atmosphere in that Brooklyn Centre was electric by the time that fight was on. And I think it's, as we mentioned last week, it must be exceptionally difficult, particularly when you're a fighter like Boots, to not draw from that energy in the crowd and allow that to influence the way that you're fighting, and just to want to put on a show and not be seen to take a backward step, not be seen to show any vulnerabilities. And when you hit, rather than move out the way or hold or defend, it's, I'm going to hit you back. And that seemed to be the mentality for Boots Ennis. As I say, that is something that I think will stop him from dominating the sport for many years to come. He appears to have the intelligence and know-how to be aware enough to know that that isn't the best way to fight in every single contest. But he got it done against Zayas. And for the most part, I thought it was an exceptional showing. But I saw someone compare him to Meldrick Taylor over the weekend, with kind of the warning that Taylor at his best was such a sumptuous fighter to watch, but his willingness to go into battle, his desire to prove that he was the harder man on the night, was ultimately his downfall. He had one too many tough fights, and we know what kind of state Meldrick Taylor is in now, and we know that when we look back on the peak of Meldrick Taylor, it was a really short peak. Whether Ennis, who 29 years old, no doubt feels invincible every single time he steps out of bed every single morning, will take heed of that to that extent, we don't know. But there are warning signs there that should Ennis continue to fight in that manner, then there is only so much longer he will last at the top.
Interesting, because there are little glimpses and cameos that he has, that the sort of speed and guile and intelligence to maybe elevate himself way beyond that, possibly. But then again, like we said last week, you have to balance it with the context of who he's beat and what his resume says. And that is only so much, so, relatively. And again, in beating Zayas, I said last week I thought Zayas would be a test, but he's not a big puncher, Zayas, is he? So again, we need the context. We need the context. And are there enough names around at 154 pounds to really bring that out of him? That brilliance. Who are we looking at? Obviously, you've got Josh Kelly in the picture. You've got Fundora, Virgil Ortiz, Madrimov, maybe.
If he beats all of those names, then that's a heck of a run at 154. All of those in their own way are appealing fights. The most appealing for me out of those is one of the guys that doesn't hold one of the major belts, and that's Ortiz. And you can look at that third round where Zayas was landing the blows and go, well, what if that was Ortiz's power behind the punches? Would Boots have been able to walk through them in the same manner? Ortiz, I think, would probably be his biggest rival in terms of punching power. Fundora can whack. Fundora offers all sorts of weird and wonderful kind of quirks that Ennis will have to find out, being so tall and everything else. And then there's Josh Kelly, which I think probably would make the most sense. I think Kelly has got one more fight left on his current deal with Matchroom. Not saying that won't be extended, but you could imagine them bringing that over to the UK and that being a fairly big fight in the UK. I'm sure Josh Kelly at this point is more than willing to spin the dice, given the reputation of Boots Ennis, and go for that fight. It's another unification fight. It's another road to undisputed. So you can see why they would. You can see why that they would make that. I think I don't want to be kind of negative, because in our little bubble, that was a fantastic occasion. By all accounts, the Brooklyn Center was sold out. Everybody was invested in that fight. But do we hear anything about this phenomenal talent that is Jaron Boots Ennis outside of our bubble? No. It was on pay-per-view. How many people bought it? I don't know. That's the kind of fight for me, again, that you're just like, can we not show as many people this as possible? Can we not show them how wonderful our sport can be, rather than closing the door and making them pay on the gate to come through when they don't know what they're paying for? Because the vast majority of people won't know Jaron Boots Ennis. The guys want to go and play pickleball. They're not going to know Jaron Boots Ennis. They're not going to ask me about that fight. My family, when they say, oh, is there a fight on tonight? And you're like, yeah, is there? What's that? They didn't know Jaron Boots Ennis was fighting Zayas in what we're told was one of the most enticing matchups of the year so far. So then you do wonder, how big, really, will Kelly Boots Ennis be over here? And when they're talking about sticking it in a stadium, is that feasible? Maybe. But that was my only niggle in the build-up last week during the fight itself. And I just wish the whole world could watch this. But again, you have to. It's a very, very difficult point of entry if you're not familiar with the sport of boxing. It's almost like you're kind of preaching to the converted. That's our reward for being hardcore fans. But there's only so many hardcore fans, and there's only so more you can create by putting that paywall in front of it.
Yeah, it was a missed opportunity, wasn't it? Missed opportunity that, I think, by Matchroom and DAZN. I mean, let the whole world see it. It's probably a pretty hyperbolic exaggeration, but we get your point. I think ultimately it's not a double-edged sword; it's a single-edged sword, or both edges of the sword are exactly the same, and they're both painful. And that is, you're holding the fans hostage, the ones who do love and support the sport. You're making them pay, and then you're preventing the would-be fans who can maybe get more into it the opportunity to see a genuine would-be star. So yeah, both sides of that are just a bad look, and it's a missed opportunity. And I think it's a rather odd decision making financially as well, given, I think, you could have taken a small hit on that, but we don't know the details of purses, etc. So maybe they felt they needed some kind of help just to get those salaries over the line.
Well, and on the one hand, you can say that, and on the one hand, you can say, hang on, isn't charging a monthly fee enough to stage these kind of fights? Do we need pay-per-view? Is there seriously enough people that are going to be paying for the pay-per-view to then pay the wages of the fighters? And then there's also the current DAZN model where, I don't know, you got your super duper membership where you're guaranteed a certain amount of pay-per-views a year. There's going to be one a month or something, whatever was on the marketing spiel with that. So therefore, there's always going to be pressure to create a fight that might just about be deemed pay-per-view. But we're ultimately, and this is what I've realised, and you kind of, people like myself over the years have got on their soapbox and mentioned it. You see people on social media, you see people on Substack, and they're all grumbling and groaning and saying the whole sport is in a mess. What I have realised is that we're not the people in the back room doing the sums. We're not on the coalface. We don't know what the instructions of DAZN are to Matchroom. We don't know what they're being told. We don't know how much freedom they have to come to, if they'd be able to turn around and say, no, don't want to do this on pay-per-view. Thank you very much, my big boss at DAZN. We want it to be free for everybody. It's unlikely, having had numerous conversations over the years, that they would have the freedom to make that decision.
No, you hit the nail on the head, Matt. They've created a climate with this tiered subscription, effectively, that they now have to find fights that fit into those tiers, and that's exactly what's happened. So, you're just going to get fights that are not pay-per-view fights that have to go on the additional subscription bandwidth. You're absolutely right. You've hit the nail on the head. Ben Whittaker got a big opportunity stateside, an opportunity to sell himself, and he is doing that in and out of the ring. Whether it's music to your ears or suits your taste, I suspect more no than yes, and he is going to rub people up the wrong way, this fella. I mean, at least he smiles when he says it, even although much of what he says, you just think, come on, really? Everything doesn't have to be for effect. You're striving so hard to give us a witty payoff line, and most of the time they're not very witty. He's trying so hard to be clever. Just be that in the ring, because he is being that in the ring. And the link up with Andy Lee has been good for them both. Andy Lee is loving this journey, and he's buying into a lot of the other stuff that goes along with it, because he's so invested, I think, personally, in what Ben Whittaker is doing. And they've got this unbeaten knockout stretch between them in the ring where he's sparkling, Matt. Absolutely sparkling.
He really is. I think that's 3 one-round knockouts and a second-round knockout in the 4 fights that they've been together. And Andy Lee is, for those that haven't met him or spent time with him, he is, as you would imagine, he's a exceptionally knowledgeable, thoughtful, intelligent boxing man, a kind boxing man, and the perfect foil for Ben Whittaker. And you're seeing improvements in Whittaker. And I think we said something last week where this fight was made for Whittaker to win and to look good. This wasn't his 50-50 challenge before he fought for a world title, or his 50-50 challenge when he fought, when he eventually did get that world title shot. This was designed as what they used to call a vehicle, a showcase. And he got in that vehicle and he put his foot down, and he showed everybody what he could do. But the opponent was tough. He'd gone 10 rounds with Badu Jack. He wasn't one of the best 10 fighters in the world, but I think you could probably, if you're going to get down to about 30 or so, you could have made an argument that he'd just about scraping around that sort of level. He had the inactivity, but he came with ambition. And I was thinking this when I was looking at his ring attire. But this isn't a guy that's just come to roll over. He's really put some effort into thinking what he's going to wear here. And he came with a bit of ambition. He wanted to look good. He didn't look like a bad fighter. He didn't look like a shot fighter. As I say, he was inactive heading in. But Ben Whittaker just took him apart. A very good performance from Ben Whittaker. And I hope now, and I think that the line afterwards is that He's going to go back. He's going to go back to Birmingham, where he will headline, and I think we'll see a tougher opponent there. And that's where we need to see the right level of opponent with the plan in 2027 to kind of launch him towards the division's best. Andy Lee said afterwards, he's ready now, but perhaps we do just need a fight where we can learn a little bit more, where we can get a few more rounds under our belt. But as far as I'm concerned, from what I'm seeing in the gym, this kid now is ready to challenge the world's best.
Yeah, he's fully invested, isn't he? Andy Lee, he is banging into it. What do you make of the other stuff that goes along with it? Whittaker, the almost desperate striving for a smart arsed remark. I mean, it does wear a bit thin. As I say, at least he does it with a smile on his face, and he's enjoying it. For me, it's just like, I don't know if it quite works for me, but what's your take on it?
I'm not convinced he's lying awake thinking, what could I say tomorrow if I win sensationally? I'm not convinced he's necessarily trying that hard, but I think he's acutely aware of this reputation that he has. I think he's acutely aware that it gets attention. And I think in the moment he probably is thinking, what should I say here? What should I say to kind of come across in the manner that I have throughout my career? But he is who he is. I don't know Ben Whittaker. I haven't spent much time with him. I don't know what he's like, but by all accounts, he's a perfectly lovely bloke behind the scenes. And then he does become someone else when he steps foot in the ring. I think the showboating that we saw earlier on in his career was natural. I don't think it was the wisest things to be doing, but it just comes to him. And there probably is now, I think, some pressure to be this kind of Ben Whittaker. He still reminds me of Naz, and that is whether it's because there's a certain accent that's Birmingham isn't the same as the Sheffield accent, but you're certainly more moving north through the country. And when you hear someone with an accent out in America who's English, who's doing the things that Whittaker's doing inside the ring, it's difficult not to think of Nassim Hamid driving everybody mad in America. And you got a bit of that with Whittaker. You could hear that there were cheers, and then by the time he'd finished his post-fight interview, there's booze in there as well, isn't there? So you could almost say job done. But I hear what you're saying. It's not the wittiest things that he's saying. It's not. It isn't the sound bites that perhaps he would have wanted. But Ben Whittaker is Ben Whittaker, and he isn't going to change.
No. It is what it is. I think we have to just accept it almost as an act that comes with the boxing, and it'll work. The same as sort of Eubank Sr. and Jr. It'll work. Maybe same as Naz to an extent. I suppose with all of that stuff, my take is always the same. Sort of be yourself. And if that's you, then fine. And people who do or have been around him for years say that, he pretty much has been the same throughout the amateurs. That is part of him. Part of his shtick is part of his makeup. So we'll see how it all plays out. But in the ring, he really is sparkling at the moment. How does he sort of fit in? You're saying that they're going to come back to Brum in October and then sort of target titles in 2027. Sounds like sort of between them, Eddie Hearn and Andy Lee, they've got enough of the handbrake on and they've got enough of a vision about how it looks. Is it another kind of international opponent in October, or could we see him in with a sort of British opponent that we maybe know?
We may well see him in with a British opponent that we maybe know, and I think if it is in Britain, it would make sense for it to be a British rival to generate the most appeal in the British public. Excuse me. What we saw with some other news that came out last week in the light heavyweight division is that Bivol is going to go off and have surgery on an injury, and then his plan is to come back and fight Callum Smith either late this year or early next. And there have been rumours that Callum Smith was going to have a rematch with Joshua Buatsi. So then you wonder, what's Joshua Buatsi going to do? Is he now at a point in his career where he probably feels like he has no choice but to fight someone like Ben Whittaker in order to prove to everybody that he's still around? That's a possibility. And I think also a fight with someone like a Ben Whittaker, for Buatsi is probably one of the most lucrative that he could wish for, particularly now that Callum Smith appears to be otherwise engaged with Dimitri Bivol. Something else that came to mind as well when you just mentioned Chris Eubank Jr. Is that we also had news last week, and this is a news line that we should probably throw in there, is that Chris Eubank Jr. is planning to come back at the end of the year, and he has said, and he's reiterated that rather concerning line that he's going to fight until the wheels come off. He admitted that the wheels nearly came off in the Conor Benn rematch, but he's had some time away, and he is now planning to come back. He's out in Nigeria at the moment. The suggestion that he may have a comeback fight in Nigeria. But yeah, Chris Eubank Jr. will continue to fight despite the harrowing nature of his most recent contest, which was the beyond one-sided loss to Conor Benn in their November 2025 rematch.
Which is surprising given what he's been saying in the wake of becoming a father, Matt, as well, with that very real life perspective. Now, that can go one of two ways, couldn't it? The inspiration to want to provide, to want to lead, to want to inspire your own child. I'm sure that's part of it. But the other side of it, the more real and important side of it, is that you want to be there for that child. And I must admit, I do find that surprising, given the huge change in his life.
I think there's an awful lot going on in the mind, and there has been for quite a while now, of Chris Eubank Jr., very deep thinker, aware of his place on the planet, aware of his place in the family. Eubank Sr. came out a couple of weeks before Junior confirmed that he was planning to come back to say that his son is shot to bits and he should not fight again. And whether or not Eubank Jr. will publicly admit it, I can only imagine how excruciatingly difficult he would have found to have been beaten so savagely by Conor Benn in their rematch in front of his father. I can only imagine how hard he will find it to look himself in the mirror and say, I can't do this anymore. Someone like who's so young and effervescent and cocksure as Eubank Jr. has always been, to then be faced with the exit door and it's glaring at you to say, get out, would be probably beyond him to be able to take those steps and just say, yeah, okay, that's as good as it's going to get. That first fight with Conor Benn is as good as my career is going to get. Now, he's had a fantastic career. One of the biggest stars in British boxing for the best part of the last 15 years. That's not easy. Now, you can say he had a leg up with his surname, and the whole pantomime that was he and his dad, which wouldn't have drawn nearly enough attention if it wasn't Chris Eubank Jr. Alongside his famous father. He wouldn't have had perhaps some of the opportunities, but a lot of the opportunities he earned. But now, in the darkest of night, he will be thinking, crikey, my dad won 2 world titles in 2 weight classes, and I had that one fight against Conor Benn that I won, and then I've just gone and lost the rematch. I'm sure I can do something else. I'm sure I can prove my dad wrong. It's, I would say, harder for him than it is for most fighters at this point to just say enough is enough, because he's always had that pressure of the Eubank name on his back. He's not only trying to prove his dad wrong, trying to do the memory of his deceased brother proud, Seb. And yes, even though you may think that now you've got these 2 precious children, that ordinarily you'd think, okay, I need to make sure now that I'm going to be as fit and as well for as many years as I possibly can. There may also be other emotions stirred within him where he thinks that, yeah, I want to show them what I can do. I want to win fights while that perhaps they can look back on and say, well, he had those fights just after we were born. It's a very, very complex situation for Eubank Jr. And as much as I believe that he has been showing signs of decline for a number of years now, and I think the performance against Conor Benn first time round was an aberration, he will be yearning to prove an awful lot of people wrong.
We don't have enough time to give this fight the the analysis and appreciation that it deserves. But Crocker against Paro was a cracker, really close competitive fight. It was Paro on home turf in Brisbane that just squeaked it 115, 113 on all three of those scorecards. And it was that kind of fight, Matt. I mean, I had it a draw in the end. I thought scoring it round by round, I was absolutely going to be scoring it for Paro. Think I had him 4 up with 4 rounds to go, and then had Crocker kind of sweeping the boards with that surge, that strong surge down the stretch. But it was an absolute squeaker, and I think I had bracket sort of question mark next to 6 rounds. If you've got 6 of the 12 rounds as question marks, then you really can't go mad about any scorecard, particularly not one that is basically a round between them. So it was a very, very tight fight. I can see why people would have it just for Paro and people would have it just for Crocker. And I think what also adds confusion into the mix, or difficulty and debate into the mix, is the fact that you had Paro busier point scoring, but Crocker throwing the heavier punches. So you had a real contrast. And also, sprinkled into that, you had some rounds where Paro started the first half and then Crocker came back. So all the ingredients for an absolute tough squeaker were in there. But it was a good competitive fight.
Yeah, I haven't seen it in its entirety. I've seen highlights. I've read numerous reports, and it does appear that Crocker kind of came on strong towards the end, and you kind of feel for him a little bit in that he got the title and then he had to go out to Australia to defend it, and that was a big part of the build-up. That was a big part of the chat. He was exceptionally respectful in the build-up as well to Liam Paro. Not saying that he was consigned to defeat or anything of that nature, but he was constantly referring himself as the underdog. And Paro was the favourite going in. I wonder if there is any market in a rematch. But yeah, Lewis Crocker loses his title in his first defence.
And you sort of feel maybe they missed an opportunity allowing that to go away, his promoters allowing that to go away on Aussie soil. I mean, that's a Frank Warren 101 no-no, isn't
it? Maybe. It's a difficult, because with a purse bid, it isn't, and I always find this really odd, the way that they do purse bids. It's not like an auction where you can essentially bid against each other and know what you're bidding against, and thus you can then say, okay, well, we'll pull out all the stops and we'll stage this fight in the UK no matter what. You put in a blind bid, essentially. The envelopes are opened, and whichever is the highest bid gets the fight. You can't then go back and say, well, hang on, we've had this from No Limit Boxing. Do you want to, can we raise you 20,000 match ring?
Yeah.
It's not like that. So it is a bit of a gamble. So it's not, so yes, perhaps they dropped the ball a little bit, but I suspect it wasn't a case of them thinking this isn't going to be enough to stage the fight. We'll just send in this low ball offer, and it appears that we've tried. They will have put in an offer what they think they would have presumed would have been enough to get it over the line.
Very respectful afterwards as well, Crocker. He could easily have steamed and stewed about that, but I think even although you sensed he wanted to, he just kind of did the right thing, said the right thing, even although I don't think he really wanted to. He was strong, Crocker, down the stretch, which is good, and that might just allay any fears that he absolutely has to go up to 154. But, having just looked at Boots do that in his second fight at super welterweight, you wonder if the final chapter of Crocker's career is going to be in a higher division.
Very possibly. But then you kind of survey the landscape and you think, well, would I be better off trying to retain my position within the welterweight rankings, get another win, and then possibly I'm in pole position for another title shot? Or do I go up to 154, where there are people like Boots Ennis there? And is that realistically a winnable fight for me? And realistically, is that ever going to get made?
Action this weekend, Matt. It should have been Joe Cordina in the other corner against Abdullah Mason, the unbeaten southpaw, 22-year-old American who's unbeaten in 20 with 17 knockouts. Of course, was in that sparkling, what ended up being quite a brutal fight with Sam Noakes last November. It was supposed to be Joe Cordina. It's now the veteran Albert Bell who steps up. and steps up to 12-round distance title challenger as well. Mason, very short price favourite to win that against a late sub. Should have been Cordina. He's got himself into hot water closer to home.
He's got himself in some bother. I mean, he went to the US Embassy beginning of last week in an effort to just get a visa signed and sealed so he could go off and have his opportunity against Abdullah Mason. It was rejected. Initially, there were rumours that he was injured. Cordina came out on social media and said this isn't anything to do with an injury. This is purely the US Embassy turning around and saying, I will not be allowed into the country. And then a day or so after that, clips that were kind of doing the rounds of Cordina in an altercation outside a petrol station in February, then kind of went viral. And it would appear that Cordina has assault charges to answer in a Welsh court, in a Cardiff court, at the beginning of July. I think he was trying to argue the case that, well, I'm going to go and have this fight with Abdullah Mason. I will be back in time to then go to court. But they were not going to allow it. So in comes Albert Bell, who I think is ranked 6th by the WBO. So it was kind of an easy switch over. He was supposed to be fighting Andy Cruz a couple of weeks later on a matchroom bill, but matchroom have said, yep, no, that's fine. You go off and have this opportunity against Abdullah Mason. It's not as an intriguing fight as the fight with Cordina would have been. And I think that, I think the bookies have probably got that one right.
Yeah, and maybe not as short as you'd have thought. 2-7, so sort of 3-1 on, 1-3 with Albert Bell, 3-1 again. So maybe not as short as you might have thought for Abdullah Mason to win that one. Bruce Carrington is much shorter to beat Rennie Palacios, 2 unbeaten fighters. Carrington, the New Yorker, who's the new WBC featherweight champion as well. So like Mason, first defense of his title, he's 12-1 on, 1-12 to win that one. So Carrington, who beat Carlos Castro last time up, he is fancied to win that one. And there's a nice fight between sort of 2 unbeaten welterweights who are kind of coming through the ranks. Delente Johnson and the Canadian Christopher Guerrero, they're sort of 17-0, 16-0. They're guys who are sort of making their way up the rankings. They're on the undercard there as well. So that's all of the action coming up this weekend. Big thanks to the Apple Plus and to the Patreons. Thank you so much for your support. We just couldn't do the pod week to week without you. So thank you. If you want to help in that way, you want to support, you want to go advert free with your podcast, then you can do so for less than $5 each and every month. That's as little as it costs. And a big thanks to NES Medical as well. They're the independent experts in ringside medical care. They provide global medical coverage for professional and also amateur boxing events. That includes ringside medicine training and basic life support accredited courses. Boxer safety, their priority. You can find Neil and the team at nasmedical.co.uk. Thanks to them. Next up is This Week. And this week, well, we're going to take you back to June, late June, for one fight. And that is Sugar Shane Mosley defending his IBF lightweight title for the 4th time against Colombian Wilfredo Ruiz, top 10 fighter. That's a fight from June. But Matt Christie, who's always the giver in life, he's always the giver, and he likes to look to the future as well. He wants to take you to late September. And the following year, late September the following year. So a year and 3 months later, Matt wants to take you to Wilfredo Rivera. Would you like to explain yourself, Matthew?
So I saw your message come through that was succinct, and it was Shane Mosley versus Wilfredo Ruiz. And I looked at it, put the thumbs up emoji on it, and in my head, I was then, because I was kind of out with the dog, I was then like, oh, okay, oh yeah, I remember that one. And just sat down this morning, didn't even look at Shane Mosley's record, didn't even look at the date of this fight, because locked into my head, it was Shane Mosley versus Wilfredo Rivera. Yeah. So my bad, my fault.
Okay, so your fight's a year and 3 months later. What it is, though, is significant for a number of factors. Mainly, Mosley's first fight up at welterweight, Matt, wasn't it? And that's interesting because he's obviously the fight I've looked at, the fight that is from this week, is his sort of run as a sort of starting to sparkle lightweight at 135 pounds. And there's some really interesting lines in commentary from Steve Albert and the team. They've actually got Mills Lane as part of the commentary team in this one.
Wow.
And it's fascinating. Yeah, Mills Lane. I mean, he's got some really, as you'd expect from Mills Lane, really direct, punchy, sort of growling delivery with some of his his words, his lines, and his language. He says in the first round of Ruiz, he got nailed. It's a 10-8. He got nailed, man. And he just so direct. But the sort of overall discussion in this one is one of sort of Mosley as an emerging would-be star, sort of becoming a pound for pound discussed fighter. They're already kind of looking into the future. Mills Lane says he can do everything Oscar can do, save maybe the punch. He might have to go up for the big fights, they're saying in commentary. They're already starting to kind of predict the future. They're looking at the path, and that path actually will jump 140 pounds as we get to a year into the distance for the fight that you're talking about against Wilfredo Rivera, his first up at welterweight.
And the fight against Rivera, I mean, I'm presuming, I don't remember the fight against Ruiz. I'm sure in the assuming that Mosley looks sensational, and that was the sentiment going into this, is that he was a sensational, destructive, exceptionally impressive lightweight, but can he do it up at welterweight? And it was just 5 months after his last fight at lightweight when he beat John Brown, where he weighed 135. Mosley comes in, I think, on this one at 146 for his first fight up at welterweight against, with hindsight, a really tough opponent. Now, Wilfredo Rivera is someone who had those two really close fights with Pernell Whittaker. He'd been stopped by Oscar De La Hoya, but it was on cuts in 8 rounds. It wasn't a suggestion that he was about to get knocked out by Oscar De La Hoya or anything like that. So Rivera was known for his toughness. It's a very, very intelligent bit of matchmaking from Team Mosley, in that Rivera was a threat. Mosley would have started out as a favourite, but with the whole narrative about Mosley being a devastating puncher, if he can knock out Wilfredo Rivera after moving up 2 weight classes, then he's a threat to anyone in the talent-laden 147 class. And that eventually is what Shane Mosley did.
And against Ruiz, defending his IBF lightweight title, it is kind of just 2 fighters on different trajectories, 2 fighters with very different sort of depth of ability and talent. And Mosley is just streets clear of him. There is a period in round 4 where Mosley does a bit of a boots Ennis, and it's almost like a hook trade fest, where they just go toe-to-toe, head-to-head, and they're just winging away at each other with hooks. And he does take a few. He does take chances and takes risks. But either side of that 4th round, first 3, and then it finishes in the 5th, where Mosley's just miles too good. And the finish is really intelligent. It's a really articulate finish because he changes sort of up and down levels, and he goes from head to body, changing in the same sort of combination of shots. Lovely left hook to the body, then he goes upstairs to the head, and then he finishes it with a long straight right hand. A brilliant performance, as Barry Tompkins. They're raving about Mosley in this one, Matt, raving about him, looking into the future, but already saying that he's no longer a work in progress. He's arrived, says Barry Tompkins in commentary here. They love Mosley.
The Rivera fight was a HBO broadcast, so you had Lampley, Merchant, and George Foreman doing the lion's share of the commentary and analysis. Harold Lederman obviously doing the scoring behind the scenes. But I did look back and I looked at the and this is the point where I really should have realised I was looking at the wrong fight, because I looked at the pound for pound rankings at the time, going into this fight, and you had Roy Jones at number 1, Felix Trinidad at number 2, who's fresh off a contentious victory over Oscar De La Hoya, I think the week or so before. De La Hoya at 3, and Mosley was at 4. And you had people like Mark Johnson, Ricardo Lopez, Floyd Mayweather, Nassim Hamed, Johnny Tapia, Lennox Lewis, Ike Corte, and B-Hop making up the Dynamite Dozen of the KO magazine at that particular point in history. Some really good fighters, but that's how well regarded Mosley was. But there was a lot of talk from the HBO team beforehand, as the fight begins, that if you want to see the finest exhibition of body punching here and getting body punching right and when to throw the right body punches, watch Shane Mosley here. And interestingly, he was headhunting through most of the contest, almost a little bit distracted by a desire to prove that he could knock out someone like Wilfredo Rivera and put the rest of the welterweight division on notice. And something strange happened right at the end, in the 10th round. Now, I think we've mentioned kind of George Foreman's sometimes wacky observations in this fight. You all of a sudden in the 10th round, where Mosley had been given a bit of a kick up the arse because his corner team had been tipped off about the scores. Going into the last round, it was 86-85 to Rivera, which seemed way off. 86-85 Mosley, 88-83 Mosley. And the Mosley corner are saying to Shane, you can't leave this in the hands of the judges. Something peculiar is going on here. We've seen the scores. They're not right. Get out there and do a job. Jim Lampley then starts to take up commentary, and Mosley is well on top in the 10th round, but Lampley says there isn't going to be a knockout in this fight. Merchant agrees with him. Mosley then lands a really sharp right hand. George Foreman then says, that's the one that's hurt Rivera after all these rounds. He's gone and he's about to go. Lampley and Merchant, who at this point are probably completely familiar with the madness of Big George, just ignore him. Just ignore his point and carry on with what they're saying, that it's going to go the distance. And then all of a sudden, Mosley lands the shot and Rivera's down and the count is dispensed and it's a KO 10 for Shane Mosley, and Big George Foreman at last got one right.
It shows you sometimes fighters do have a sense, don't they? They do have a spidey sense. They do see things that we don't quite see. Absolutely. Fascinating. Fascinating. Of course, you know, Mosley, we have to say it, Mosley was kind of caught up in the Balco scandal, the Victor Conte Balco scandal, wasn't he? And, you know, his defense was he unknowingly took the Balco stuff, the clear, etc. You can read all about that. The unknowing defense, I think they called it, or something of that nature. You have to consider that, Matt. You have to consider it.
Unfortunately, you can't help but consider it with certain fighters of this era. And when I say that with certain fighters, so there was the Mosley scandal. Roy Jones Jr., we know, failed test for performance-enhancing drugs. There was the Evander Holyfield, kind of his address and the name Evan Field that these substances were going out to. You can't now help but look at certain performances and just draw certain conclusions. I even go back to the 1980s, where boxing was so slow to attempt to discover if boxers were using performance-enhancing drugs. But if you're telling me that people like Ben Johnson, the sprinter Ben Johnson, was using performance-enhancing drugs, awful lot of sprinters, athletics, it was rife, cycling, it was rife. If you're telling me that boxers were not around the 1980s, then I'm sorry, you're telling me fibs. And I can't help but look at the best fighters of the 1980s and wonder exactly what was going on behind the scenes, because I would imagine they'd have had free reign at that point to put whatever they wanted in their system.
Terrifying, isn't it? Terrifying when you think of it. Yeah, some of the biggest names in the sport. Mosley, one associated or more than associated over the years. Yeah, Mosley, Holyfield, Roy Jones Jr., wing it on to the modern day, Canelo, Fury, and the list goes on and on and on. He would fight them all, Mosley. You've got to say that. Cotto, Floyd, Canelo, Pacquiao. He would fight them all.
He would, and he fought on well past his best, but generally, apart from his most recent comeback, he was generally just about giving a good enough account of himself. But I think his peak, if not at lightweight, where he did look invincible at lightweight, people don't really talk about Shane Mosley as one of the greatest lightweights that ever lived, but that was where he looked at his most invincible. Sadly, he didn't really have the opponents down there to solidify any kind of greatness claims down there. But when he first moved up to welterweight, beating the likes of Oscar De La Hoya, he was a really special fighter.
And probably the person who landed the best, most meaningful punch ever on Floyd Mayweather, I'd guess.
The one that's played over and over again. Yeah. That moment in the second round of the Mayweather fight where he made Mayweather do bit of a dance and look unsteady. And Mosley, if anything, even late on in his career, because that did come past his best, he was past his best when he had that fight with Floyd Mayweather. There was always that notion that he had, at the very least, a puncher's chance. And I know it's a cliche in boxing, but Mosley was always recognised throughout his career of carrying serious one-punch potency.
And he was still good enough to pretty much demolish Antonio Margarito after then. And of course, he and his team were the people that exposed Margarito on the hand wraps, weren't they?
Yep. Yeah. And I think, you look through, we've just mentioned Mosley's kind of checkered, questionable past with performance-enhancing drugs. And then he goes and beats arguably a fighter who's regarded as the sport's biggest villain of all time in Antonio Margarito.
Yeah. So what a history, but also what a fighter at times as well. That's Sugar Shane Mosley. Take your pick from his repertoire. It could be June of 1998. It could be September of 1999. There's so much to choose from. I hope you've been entertained. I hope we've provoked a few thoughts, sparked a few interests, and furnished and furthered your love of this mad game, boxing. We'll be back again next time. Look after yourself. Bye for now.